Good day, everyone. Scooter coming to you live from the Granville Guitars World Headquarters here in lovely St. Petersburg, Florida. Today on the bench we've got an old blackface Bandmaster that I've got some history with. This was something I did a number of years back. I'm thinking 7 or 8, actually probably more like 9. This was brought to me by a customer. He had picked it up from somebody that he knew, and it was just in absolutely deplorable condition. It had been soaking wet in somebody's basement for an eternity, and it was painful because it was a lot of work and a lot of money in parts and a lot of labor, but it turned out really good, and now he's wanting me to change it up just a little bit from where it is right now, which is slightly different from its original intent, but not too far out. I don't remember honestly what the year is. Perhaps if there's some original pots, those will tell the tale. All the transformers, unfortunately, have been replaced. I had to do that because all of the old ones were completely shorted out and rusted and unusable. As we'll see here in a moment, when I pop this thing open, I'm going to show you a picture of what it looked like before I started the work. Let's flip it around back. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to order up a back plate for it, a back panel for it rather, from Mojo. I did this long enough ago that it's been sitting a while. Now it's kind of got dust and cobwebs accumulated. These are great old amplifiers, by the way. They can be a lot of fun, very toneful, very versatile. I can tell you I replaced both of those switches. There was a whole bunch of this amp that had to go away. Just wasn't any way around it. So we're going to look inside of this guy, and I'm going to do some changes to it. If this is something you might find interesting, stick around. Let's take a peek inside, shall we? Alright, as we can see, when we flip it over here, the original transformers are gone. I used modern replacements, which are fine. These are decent replacements. Today I may have used Mercury's in this, but these will be fine for the foreseeable future. These are what I selected, and it was 10 years ago. It was in 2010, so 9 years ago actually, that I did all the work on this thing. It's currently got Mesa Boogie power tubes in it, which I do not believe I put in. Not my choice for this amp. They're okay. My general rule of thumb is that Mesa Boogie tubes belong in Mesa Boogie amps. I've never really liked the sound of them in anything else, frankly. The other tubes we got in here, that looks like one I put in. There's a Marshall branded tube in V1. Another one that I put in V3. And a Fender branded tube over there in V4. V1 is a Marshall branded tube. My test numbers are still on here. This tube was tested on March the 13th of 2009. So that's about when I did the work. These tubes may have been what came in with the amplifiers. Another Marshall branded tube, March 13th of 09, and it's got my ratings from my ICO 666 in it, which is my main tube tester. V3 looks like, yeah, it's a Sovtek 12AX7WA, also 31609. It's got my little rating on it there. And then V4 is a Fender branded 12AX7 or 12AT rather, proper tube, with no numbers on it, so I never tested this tube. It might have been added later. A lot can happen in 9 years, so you know, it's possible that things may have gone differently since it was here last. Let's pop open the cap can and See if I can remember what I did in there. Alright, here's our doghouse contents here. This was not too bad. This was the one area of the circuit that I remember that was still pretty clean, but I redid everything anyway. We've got 3 F&T 22 at 500s for the preamp sections, and then for the main totem poles here we've got 100s at 350, which are an increase from standard, but I like to have some extra in that particular position. These were replaced as well. I remember doing all of this work. So it had new filter capping, courtesy of me, and you can kind of see still the scratching on the chassis over here from where I had to clean it. It was rusty and corroded. I think my description of this amp when it came in was that it looked, the inside of it, like it had been set on fire, and that a team of angry cats had put out the fire by peeing on it. It just stunk of cat urine. It was terrible. And I traced that to the cloth covered wire throughout the amplifier. It somehow, some way caught up that smell, and there was no way to get rid of it without getting rid of all of the wire. So every inch of wire, and you can see it here, every inch of wire in this amplifier is brand new. Every single inch of it, because it just stunk so bad you couldn't get anywhere near the amplifier. It'd make your stomach turn. Let's flip it over, and I'm going to show you a before picture from before I started this work, and then we'll go over the internals. Alright, here we can see a photograph that I took at the time when I did the original work on this amplifier. As I said, it was pretty well mucked up and trashed. If we look, let's see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. If we look down in this area, you can see how toasty it was. The original positions for the power tubes were here and here, and you can see very clearly how badly burnt up this entire area was. Just resistors all broken off and charred, and apparently the fire started in that particular area. What I opted for when I redid the work, I moved this power tube here, put this chassis cover, or this hole cover here in this position, and I installed a tube rectifier socket here, but I put a solid state plug-in in it, so it's still, in its current form, it's still solid state rectified, but we're going to, one of the things that I'm doing here is we're going to put a tube rectifier in it for him. If we look up here, we can see the solid state rectification up there, and there's another row of diodes beyond that. So it had rectification very similar to a twin in this particular amplifier. It's a 66, by the way. Most of the potentiometers are still original, and they mostly have 66 dates on them. So this was a 1966 amplifier. Here's your original bias cap and the original bias diode and bias supply resistor. As we scan over here, we can see the bias supply potentiometer for adjusting the idle. You can see there was some sort of a rust spot here where it probably had gotten wet and stayed wet for a long time. I was able to salvage the original board. The board was actually in pretty good shape. I did lift it up off the chassis a little further to waterfall the wiring some. Usually ends up quieter and better sounding at that point. You can see there's more fire damage down in this area right here. This whole area along here just got scorched. And like I said, this actually, even though the tubes have 09 dates on them, I have a date label in the amp that says 2011. So it's been 8 years since all this work was performed. But this stuff was just all roached and corroded, and there's another rust spot up here near the input jacks of the first channel. A lot of this stuff just got, all of this wire went away. all of it. I replaced all the wiring, and you'll see here in a moment when I move over to the chassis. But I wanted to show this original photo from this was taken at the old shop over on 38th, and this was an overhaul. This was a complete gutting and overhaul. There was nothing in this amp that was really salvageable other than the odd component here and there, and the owner just made the decision to make it all new and all playable and all solid, so that's what we did. So let's move over to the chassis here. Here is the chassis as it exists today. As you can see, we moved some components over. The normal channel has been changed a bit. Those tone stack caps for the normal channel are obviously not original. He wanted something a little different in that channel, and I added some bypass stuff up here on the second triode to sort of gain that channel up just a little bit, give him a little different sound on that particular channel. If we look up towards the inputs here, I believe, if we can see it on the camera, see if we can get a little more light in there. I think those are the original jacks and resistors. They are, yeah. And the original bright cap is up here too, so-called bright cap. There it is. But you can see how much I had to do here, basically. The tone stack caps on the second channel are the stock ones, the original ones. And in the case of that right there, that's an original solder joint. Some of this I was able to salvage. It looks as though this is the vibrato channel, or not vibrato channel, but it's the second channel. Well, there's vibrato on this. Vibrato channel slope resistor is right here. The normal channel slope and cathode for the preamp resistors have been changed, and their values are slightly different. A little more Marshall style on that channel. Not something I typically like to do, particularly on a vintage amplifier, but this thing was a complete salvage job, and he wanted to do something a little different with that channel, so that's why I went ahead and did that for him. But in most cases, I don't recommend doing that, and today I probably wouldn't even do that in this situation. I would stick with the normal values. Anyway, down here, original cap here. Yeah, right there. Original cap there. These have all been changed. Those resistors, that grouping up there, as well as all of the tremolo clock resistors are right there, or capacitors rather. Those have all been changed out. All of this stuff was changed. I believe these two guys here are original, and of course this capacitor is original. Let's see here. This is the negative feedback coupling. That one's been changed. These splitter resistors here for the phase inverter, and this phase inverter cathode resistor, that's all been changed out for different stuff. This was kind of a copy of an amp that I built for myself called the Sandra Jean, and it actually says so right up there above my work label that shows a completion date of May 26, 2011. And I wrote Sandra Jean in it because it was I used my Sandra Jean amplifier as sort of a guidepost or a roadmap, if you will, as to how I was going to do this. And so I wanted it. That was kind of a note to myself, if nothing else. Now, if we look up here, there is one change. When I got the power transformer for this thing, it had a tap. It had the necessary taps for a tube rectifier. So I omitted the solid state rectification up here, changed out all of these components from the bias supply, and installed a socket up here for a tube rectifier to be used if desired, and then used a solid state plug-in. I felt like that was a more versatile situation for the future. The Bandmaster of 1966 had solid state rectification rather than vacuum tube, and that allowed it to be a little different. This allows it to be anything you want. We can, as we're going to today, we're going to put a tube rectifier in this. The other thing he has requested is that we're going to install a pair of JJ 6V6s, and let's see if I can get a little better camera angle here towards those sockets. Yeah, the sockets have been arranged so that you can use any octal tube that you want to, essentially, so long as the power transformer will support it. And careful readings must be undertaken to make sure that's going to happen, of course. But in the case of this amplifier and the JJ 6V6, we can put 6V6s in this amplifier. So it's going to end up sounding quite a bit more like a deluxe, but probably with a great deal more headroom because we have significantly larger transformers overall. Power transformer is larger, output transformer is larger. You know, there's no reverb to sort of clutter things up. So it's going to be a kind of a cool sound on its own. He wanted to be able to get more teeth out of it at a lower volume. So that's why we're getting rid of the 6L6s and going to 6Vs. As we cast our attention across the amp here, let's go back to this end of the circuit board. You can see that I've used... let's see here. Here are your output coupling capacitors here. Those are Sprague orange drops. Down here for the phase inverter resistors, let me go back to my reference picture here. I think I may have left those from stock. No, those are not stock. Those are the value that you typically see in later silver faces. I liked the way they sounded in this amp. Typically you're going to see a 100K and an 82K here. These are both, unless I miss my guess from the color codes, I believe that those are 47K each. Well, you know what? Let's not guess. It's not in my nature to guess. So I'm just going to get out my meter and take a real quick reading here. Yeah, they're both reading around 56 to 58K, so they've drifted a fair amount, but they are 47K resistors. That seeks to tighten the amp up a little bit. The player, the owner of the amp, has a certain playing style that sort of choice will lend itself to. And also I did something different with the 220Ks up here. Those are 68Ks, which is again something more of a later silver face thing. Now, some of you may cry foul at all of that, but I was trying to tailor this amp to his playing style. And since it was an overhaul, meaning many of the original components were faulty and had to be changed out anyway, we wanted to try something a little different with it. And if we didn't like it, then I can always make it stock. I can always make it original, you know, with more closely, with resistors more closely matching those original measurements. Anyways, that kind of covers the interior of it. As we go down here to the tube sockets, you can see that all of this had to be replaced. All of that cloth covered wire had to go, and it did, and it stunk. I was so glad to get that wire out of my shop because it was really stinky. So anyway, that's a quick little tour of the inside of this jewel. It does have a unique and wonderful sound all its own. Very Fender-ish, but it'll do some toothier things as well. But the owner wants to try something a little different, so we're going to put some 6V6s in, and I'm going to put a tube rectifier in, and we're going to see how it sounds. Alright, we've got her all tubed up again. You can see I've opted for the JJ GZ34 5AR4 rectifier tube and a pair of JJ 6V6s. Now, why am I insisting on the JJ 6V6? Well, I'll tell you. The JJ 6V6 I don't even know that it's really a 6v6, to be frank with you. It puts up with an awful lot of additional B plus energy as compared to a traditional 6v6. It just takes a lot more abuse. It'll take much higher plate voltages. I don't know. It's one of my favorite vacuum tubes. It might be my favorite vacuum tube period ever of all time. I've put these things in Hot Rod Deluxes. I've put them in Bassman amplifiers. They're especially nice in Tweed Bassman 410, the old Tweed Bassmans. They bring your wattage way down. They usually can be biased in without too much trouble. Maybe some slight modifications in some amplifiers, but in most cases they'll go right in. And it's much, I like it much better than trying to so-called attenuate an amplifier. I'm not a big fan of amplifier attenuators. I think it's a little like putting normal size tires from your Toyota onto a monster truck. It'll work for a little while, but you're not going to get very far. I just think this is a better idea for amplifiers that can take them. Now, also you'll notice that originally, as I mentioned earlier, this cover was over this socket here, and the two power tubes were positioned here and here. And I moved this around. Just my thought process was, and it's probably 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. My thought process was I wanted to keep the rectifier tube away from the power tube slightly, and rather than having a power tube located here right next to the power transformer, where a rectifier tube is going to be applying enough radiated heat anyway, to try and kind of minimize the radiated heat applied to the power transformer. Now, this particular power transformer is designed for the Bandmaster. This is a Bandmaster power transformer, and it's pretty good size. It'll handle a lot, but I wanted to minimize that, and I thought this was the best way to do it. Is it the only way? Of course not. Is it ultimately the absolute correct way? Who knows for sure, but it sounds really good, so I've left it alone. Installed these tubes. I've set my idle to where I want it, which will be at a safe operating voltage, but should last a good long while. And more importantly, the overall volume level of the amp has decreased in the output stage a fair amount, so that this amp will be able to be enjoyed at lower volumes than it was really getting to before. Now you can peg this thing to 10, and it's at a semi-conversational volume. You could still probably gig with it, but it's a much better, a much more versatile piece for lower volumes. And the beauty of all of this is that should he decide to go back to your solid-state rectifier plug-in and the 6L6s that he had in there, it's very easy to do. You just plug them in, recheck your idle current, go on with your life. It's pretty simple, honestly. But it allows the amp to be a little more versatile. It gives you a little more opportunities for other things. So I'm going to put this back into the cabinet, and we're going to do a sound test on it. All right, here we are with this 1966 Bandmaster. Wonderful head. I've actually just set up here with my my Gold Top LPJ Les Paul, 2012 or 13 model. I can't remember which. Seymour Duncan humbuckers, distortion in the bridge, 59 in the neck. And I've actually hooked up to it with an AB box so that we can real quickly listen to the differences between the two channels. Now, some people will tell you that they can take your Blackface Deluxe and give you the sound of a Marshall. Well, not exactly. There's too many things that are different. Too many other things. Output section, potentiometer values. There's a whole bunch of things that would have to be changed in order for this to sound exactly like a Marshall. Can we gain it up some? Yeah, you can make it gainier or livelier. You can change it around a bit, but to my way of thinking, there's a number of other things that make a Marshall, and a Fender, and ne'er the twain shall meet, as they say. So, but you can get some great sounds out of it. Right now, I'm plugged into, like I said, an AB box. I've got both volume controls wide open at 10. So that we have available liveliness and crunch. It's a little noisier than it would be right now, but honestly, for being set on 10, it's pretty quiet. Both trebles are at about 4.5, and both bass controls are about 3. I'm plugged into my trusty Randall 212 that has Celestion Special Edition 65s in it. Love it. It always sounds good no matter what I plug into it. It thinks it's a 412, but I'm not going to tell it. And that is pretty much it. Tremolo does work, but he never uses it, so we're not going to really meddle with that today. First thing I'm going to do, set into the middle position on the switch. Just give you a clean sound with both pickups. That's the B channel, which is strict Fender specs. Blackface Fender specs. As you'll recall, it has the original blue sausage capacitors for its tone controls. And I've got the bright switches off on both channels, just for fun. Well, let's hit it on that channel, see what it does. Yeah, maybe a little bit of sparkle. Yeah, not really that much difference to my ear. Okay, all other things being equal, let's switch over to the A channel, the normal channel. Little brighter, little crunchier. You can feel it wanting to dirt up as you're playing. If you dig in, it's going to really give you some... All I did was play harder right there. And again, that's with the volume on 10. Guitar's volume is on about 5. Neck pickup. That's normal channel. It's a little darker, a little mellower, maybe a little richer sounding. The other reason for having both volume controls at 10 is it's a fair comparison that way. There's no variance in the two volume controls other than what little they're bleeding off to ground at that point. They should be pretty close to 0, so it's a fair comparison between the two. If you try to match up the volume controls in the middle of their travels, it's a little trickier to get an even, honest comparison. So, again, that's the normal channel. This is the vibrato channel. Okay, let's do a little bridge pickup here. Vibrato channel. Okay, now we'll do the normal channel. Okay, now let's do the bridge pickup, and I'm going to open it up on the guitar so it's pushing it as hard as possible. That's the normal channel. Okay, now vibrato channel, or the Fender-y channel. They both got qualities that are cool. Now, having compared the two full up, we can then begin to kind of dial in some subtleties between the two in order to get a crunch channel and a clean channel out of it. Okay, so let's stay on the vibrato channel here. Turn the treble up to about 7. Turn the volume down to about 8. There's a nice clean rhythm, and then we can go to the other channel. Okay, let's hear them both together set like that. So with an AB box and an amplifier, you can have all kinds of fun. Start throwing pedals in front of it, even more fun. Yeah, I'm happy with it. Question, is it sacrilege to introduce the modifications that I did? In this particular case, I feel not. The question was advanced to the owner at the time. Do you want it to be stock? You want me to kind of change it a little bit? And he said, well, leave one channel stock and kind of fiddle with the other one. And we did. And, you know, in the phase inverter and the bias supply, I kind of went for some more silver facey sort of values that might be considered, you know, sacrilege amongst other repairmen and builders. But I think the proof is in the pudding, because the amp is going to deliver what the owner wants. It's going to deliver a nice, crunchy sound at a more comfortable volume. The 6V6s are happy in there. If I reach back around there to that power transformer, I guarantee you it's cool as a cucumber. It's handling the whole thing very well. The tubes are sitting nicely balanced. It's nice and clean and chimey when you want it to be. And it'll crunch up when you want it to. You have to forgive me, it's Ace Frehley's birthday today. So yeah, it's gonna give the owner what he wanted, and considering that the amp was basically a doorstop when it came in, originally back in 2011. Yeah, we just kind of made it into a fun tool to have some fun with. And I was okay with doing it because it was so trash and we were going to have to replace all the transformers and major rewiring. And nothing that I did is permanent. I can always go back to all those stock values should we want to someday. So overall, I'm happy with the way it came out back then. I think I like it even a little better now because with the 6L6s, it was a little bit stiffer and, and the solid state rectifier plug-in that it had. Now it's got the tube rectifier. It's a little spongier. It's a little more dynamic. But with the values that I chose for the phase inverter, it's still controllable, and I'm happy with it. And I think the current owner is going to be happy with the changes that we've made. So anyway, that's it. The 1966 Bandmaster, rescued from the grave way back when, and slightly modified today for your enjoyment. If you got any questions about anything that we do here at Granville Guitars, please seek us out on the web at www.granvilleguitars.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, and the blog is over at WordPress, A View from the Granville Bench. That's all I know for now. Everybody have a Bandmaster kind of day.